Hello, everyone. Welcome to Smart Sex, Smart Love, where talking about sex goes beyond the taboo and talking about love goes beyond the honeymoon. My guest today is Dr. Frank Anderson, an MD, Harvard-trained psychiatrist, world-renowned trauma treatment expert, psychotherapist, and acclaimed author of the Transcending trauma memoir, To Be Loved, a story of truth, trauma, and transformation. He's the co-founder of the Trauma Institute and Trauma Informed Media, organizations that promote trauma awareness, education, integration, and healing. Dr. Anderson maintains a private practice in Harvard, Massachusetts, where he lives with his husband and two sons. Today, he will talk about his book and his story on transcending trauma and being loved. Welcome, Dr. Anderson.
Thank you so much, Joe, for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's great having you here. Thank you so much. I know you're busy and you've got your book and your training, so it means a lot to me that you came.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, well, let's start with the questions. And the first one would be, what are some of the different types of trauma people experience in their lives?
One of the things that's really important to know is that there are many different types of trauma. And all traumas are not created equal. You know, people use this general term like, oh, I have a trauma history or I've been traumatized. That means very different things depending on the circumstance. And interestingly enough, Joe, like the more evolved culture and society gets, the longer my list gets, right? Like my list used to be 5 long. Now it's like 7 long, right? So I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but there's an acute traumatic event, acute stress disorder when you have a car accident or a one-time rape, for example. Those are single events. When your symptoms, and we'll talk about the difference between kind of what happens to you and how you react, right? That's a big difference. Like when people have chronic trauma, their symptoms persist well beyond 30, 60, 90 days. They get chronic trauma. There's the whole world of relational trauma, which is so popular. And I use that in quotes because so many people have grown up in dysfunctional families and have relational trauma or what we call complex PTSD. There's family legacy trauma, the trauma we can carry that carries down through the generations, through ethnic groups. This is something that often blocks trauma healing, and people aren't aware of it because it's something that they just grew up with. It's part of the messaging, right? There's cultural trauma, there's institutional trauma, there's medical trauma, and there's global trauma. So there's a lot of different types of trauma, and so you can't just lump them together. And part of my kind of purpose is to help educate people about these differences and what we can do with them.
I love that. It's very helpful for people, especially because, the term trauma is so overused, I think, on the internet, and people don't understand what it means and even all the different types that you just described.
Yes, that's exactly right. And this differentiation around what happened to you and how you respond is an important one. I have trauma. People aren't aware of the reactions to trauma is what happens to you, right? It's an experience, it's an event. And I think about frequency, intensity, and duration, right? Those are the things I kind of think about when I think about trauma. And what happens to you and how you react is multifaceted. Like some people, we were talking about this kind of earlier, some people are kind of unaffected or unscathed by something for a number of reasons. There was enough love and connection. It didn't have distorted meaning. They didn't take it personally. And so it was a bad thing that happened that they were able to process and they move on with. Rachel Yehuda from Albert Einstein says we all get one free trauma. Like everybody, your first trauma you typically recover from. And it doesn't have lasting effects. It's the second, third, fourth, and fifth that end up being problematic, right? So what happens to you? And then what are your adaptations? What are your reactions? What are your response? And I always say, Joe, love and connection heals trauma. And I'm going to say love and connection can prevent the development of PTSD. Like Basil will say often, it's not what happened to you, it's the surroundings around the event that are important. So when you're supported, there's love, there's connection, you don't it's my fault. So much relational trauma is a distortion of responsibility. When perpetrators don't take responsibility for what they do, victims tend to. So it's my fault, I'm bad, I'm wrong, I'm isolated, I'm alone, and don't have love and support. That's going to have a much bigger impact on you than if you go through something and you're really responded to, you don't personalize it, you have the love and support and connection you need. It's going to have a different kind of effect. The other thing, Joe, I'll say is like there's the temperament issue. There's my brother and I grew up in the same family. We didn't have quite the same experiences with my dad, but we were different people and we had different temperaments. And if you're highly sensitive, it's going to have a very different experience than if you're not, right? So there's who we are and there's how we react to what happens to us. That's very variable depending on the person and the situation.
And this helps me go into my next question, which we kind of talked about before we started, which is, does everybody who experiences abuse have trauma? And I always say, no, our field has conflated these two things as if no matter what abuse occurs, you're going to have trauma. And I don't agree with that. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't agree with it either. I think both are true is what I'll say. There's a lot of people in culture and society that have had bad things happen to them and they diminish it, they downplay it, and they ignore it, and it causes problems in their life. So there's one side of people like, I don't have trauma, big and strong and tough, not me. That's for wusses, There's that side of the population. And then the other side of the population does oh my gosh, I've sneezed, I've been traumatized, And so there's this over identification with trauma. Typically the younger demographics really have this. Gen Z population is much more overly identified with trauma, especially because they went through the whole global pandemic in these very formative years. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there is an over-identification and then there's a downplaying. And the reality is trauma is what happens to you, which is different than your reactions or your response. Like PTSD are symptoms as a result of having an overwhelming life experience. Mm-hmm. PTSD is not trauma. Trauma is what you went through, and it's how you react. Are you having flashbacks? Are you having trouble sleeping? Do you get depressed or suicidal, right? Are you drinking too much? Are you binging and purging? Like those are all the signs that, hey, maybe something's going on here that you're suppressing. Mm-hmm. Now, when people often don't link their suicidality or their eating disorder to their unresolved trauma. So it's very variable. And I think it needs to be unpacked for every person because everybody's different. Everybody's different.
Right. And sometimes it's not what happened to you. It's afterwards what wasn't done for you, the neglect of caring for you. That can be a trauma in and of itself, right?
Huge, huge. That's why I say love and connection heals trauma. And it can prevent it, because the most damaging is let's use a little boy sexually abused by his father or mother at night. Nobody says anything. Nobody knows. He goes downstairs to the dinner table, the breakfast table the next day. Silence, right? Absence. So that's a trauma where you're utterly alone and neglected in it, right? Very different than September 11th or the Boston bombings, for example. The whole world responds. People are pouring in resources. Everybody knows about it. How you doing? How you doing? How you doing? So it does really matter what happens after, what the environment is like that really has an impact. And, Joe, one of the things that's been interesting, critical incident debriefing. So, there's a school shooting, for example, and there's a whole team of people that go in to these schools and start putting people into groups and having them process their experience. We know now that can be harmful.
Oh.
And they're revamping the whole what's called critical incident debriefing protocol because talking about it too much encodes traumatic memory. Not talking about it at all, being neglected or isolated, increases the chance of PTSD. So there is too much and there's not enough that is problematic. There is this sweet spot to have support, to have connection, but not repetitively replay it or not ignore it like nothing's wrong, everything's fine, nothing happened. So both extremes are harmful for people, and we're really learning what the sweet spot is around the right amount of support to help minimize the effects of what I say overwhelming life experience now, Joe. I don't use the word trauma because it's so overused. I'm like, have you been through an overwhelming life experience? Well, yeah. Okay, let's talk about that.
I like that.
Yeah.
I think about, as you're talking, I've been in this field 40 years, right? And I think about my early years and the years before, about all the psychodrama and all the over and over, and the person will go over there. And I'm thinking, what a mistake, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we really, yes, we have learned a lot. When I was in my residency program, I remember moonlighting, like working extra hours at an inpatient psych unit. And there were all these high functioning women in a trauma unit totally regressed and fell apart because they were overdoing talking about their trauma, mapping it out, like talking about all their parts in a way that was really harmful,
Yeah.
One of the things I'm doing now, interestingly enough, is I'm really trying to bring trauma healing to the general public because there's just not enough therapists to go around for everybody. And I want to make it more like you're in charge of your treatment. You do a piece of work and then you live your life and then you change your behavior. Then you go back and do another piece of work, not the insurance company's in charge or the therapist. It's like you get educated and you get empowered and you are a part. I call it like self-prescribed.
Yes.
Right? You're in charge because trauma violates our sense of self. And to heal from it, you've got to regain that agency and control. So I think we need to shift the field. I think we need to shift the field.
I actually think it's shifting already. I know from my social media, especially TikTok, people will say to me, "Thank you so much. I can't afford therapy, and this is helpful." I know. Of course, I know people can't afford it, but I never thought of them using the education, for themselves.
100%. Yeah, I really believe that's important to kind of bring it to the masses in a way because there's not enough resources for everybody.
No. How would you say trauma affects our thoughts, behavior, and feelings?
Yeah, so this is a thing that, trauma, people think about, trauma affects, I say, thoughts, feelings, and physical sensations. Like our body absorbs the experience. Bessel's book, Bessel van der Kolk, for those who don't know, The Body Keeps the Score, that really speaks to it because we absorb whatever we experience through the body, and that can get encoded into physical sensation, tightness in your chest, heart racing, stomach pain, whatever it is. It can get encoded through emotion. People can get overwhelmed. They can get sad. They can get panic attacks. So there's an emotional encoding of trauma, and there's distorted thinking. I'm bad, I'm wrong, I'm no good, I'm unlovable, it was my fault. So trauma really does get encoded in many different ways. And this is one of the reasons for me why talk therapy is not necessarily the best for trauma, because if you're holding so much in your body or you have all these medical problems that are a manifestation of your unprocessed trauma, you need to work in the body. And if you're totally flooded and overwhelmed by images and, you're living one crisis after another, you need to really focus on the way the emotion is kind of stuck and locked in your body, right? Or the thinking, so that's important for people to know. It's not just tell me the story and then you're going to get better, because trauma is encoded in the body in those ways. Any sensory modality. You can smell, you could see, you could hear, you could feel. That's where the trauma gets encoded. And that's the way we need to kind of work on it if we're really going to help people heal, instead of just, keep it inside, because it'll show up in other ways.
What do you feel or think about going to the person who caused the trauma?
I said, I will change my answer to this now as a result of my own healing.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
I think, working through trauma with the person who has harmed you can be highly beneficial and make therapeutic change in ways that sitting in a therapist's office for 20 years will not. Okay.
Agreed. Yeah.
So there's a way that working through it in life can have much greater impact than talking about it in isolation. Okay. And I've been in therapy for 35 years and I did so much healing with my father, person to person, right? Now, what I say about this is release what you're carrying before you deal with the person who harmed you. Because sometimes people force forgive, confront, and it's premature.
Agreed.
And there's nothing helpful, and it's often re-traumatizing. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So, like, if you're gonna confront somebody or talk to them prematurely, when you're still holding so much of your trauma, you haven't processed enough of it, or you're angry and you're trying to get back at them, or culture and society or your religious organization says forgive them to move on, it won't work. It won't work. I spent, and I write about this in my memoir, 7 years with no contact with my parents, right? I wasn't strong enough to withstand their denial, and they were not open to listening to me. So I needed to set a boundary, and I needed to do my own work. And it was kind of bad. I didn't think it would ever last 7 years. That was not a plan. It just evolved that way. But by the end of those 7 years, I re-entered the family because I was different. I wasn't so affected by what they said. I knew what happened to me. Nobody was going to tell me otherwise. And so I was able to stand up and show up differently because of the work that I did on myself. Do you know what I mean? So I say, heal your trauma first, then confront, deal with, forgive, speak up to the person who harmed you second. I call it the second phase of healing. I really do. I think you can't do it prematurely, and you can't do it after you release what you're carrying about what happened to you.
I love this because I feel really strongly that you should go to the person. I've done it in my own life. And I went to my father, and I can look back. I did do pre-healing before I went to him and finally finished.
Right?
But with my mother, I did, and I went to her before, and I could see the difference. I love what you're saying.
Right? I'm really teaching the second phase of healing, and because some people are like, don't forgive, never forgive. I'm like, no, that's not true. Or you have to forgive. I'm like, well, that's not true either.
Right.
Heal your trauma. Release the energy that you're carrying that doesn't belong to you based on what happened to you first. Then, and often, like when you do that, you could see the humanity in your perpetrator. You could see how broken or limited they are, or you could see the wounds in them. Now, it doesn't mean you let them off the hook. And it doesn't mean you forget what happened. It means you have a different view because you're not carrying that stuff anymore. And so then you interact with them from a different place, from a place of strength and power, not from a place of hurt, resentment, or victimization. So it's an important thing. And I didn't really know this until I went through it myself.
Yeah, I love it. Can you talk a little bit about what internal family systems therapy is and why it's so effective in helping trauma survivors?
Yeah, so I've been the one of the lead trainers for the IFS internal family systems model of therapy. I wrote the trauma curriculum for them. I wrote a book, Transcending Trauma, describing it. It's a model of therapy that Dick Schwartz, who's the founder of the model, created. And the best way, honestly, to describe it is inside out. One or two. Like everybody has different parts or aspects of their personality, just like the Pixar movie Inside Out, right? joy, sadness, fear, anger, disgust. And they're almost like little people inside of us, little aspects of our personality. And they hold things for us. They can hold trauma, they can protect us, right? They can be just normal aspects of our personality, right? So when we think about IFS, everybody has parts, some protect, some hold pain. And there's a way to work with your internal system, talk to the different parts, be with the different parts of you that hold the pain or hold the trauma, or drink, or cut, or get angry to push away the trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's also a healing modality. It's a model of therapy for healing trauma. And IFS also says that everybody has self energy. Everybody, and I love this about it, has wisdom within themselves. Everybody has the capacity to heal. It doesn't need to be cultivated. You're born with it. You don't have access to it because trauma blocks access to your core self, but you have it within you. Because, so many people are like, I'm broken, I'm no good, I'm empty, I'm nothing. I'm like, no, that is not true. You have that in you. You just don't have access to it. I'm going to help you gain access to your wisdom and your strength.
I really like that. What about when people say, okay, I've done all my work, and then something happened in my life and it reactivated my trauma, and now it's like I never did any of my work and I'm not fully healed. What do you say to that?
Yeah, that's another thing that has changed and evolved for me over time, honestly. I have to say, I used to believe in permanent healing.
Yeah.
Right? No way. I do not believe in permanent healing anymore, but this is the way I describe it. Joe, I will say this, like, if you do your work, you will be able to release the energy that you're carrying. And then you elevate to a new vibration. You're living life at a different level because you're not carrying that trauma. Now, something's going to happen in your life that could reactivate it, but you're not back at square one. You're reacting from a different level and you learn something new and you recover quicker because of what you went through. And then you raise to the next level. So for me, it's like an elevation. Every time your trauma gets activated, there's something new to learn, there's something new to release, and there's a higher level of interacting in the world each time you do the work. Sometimes I say, look, we all have a choice. We could repeat it, we could repress it, or we can repair it, right? And we have you can just push that crap away and then you're right back at square one. Yeah. But if you do work each time, there is a true evolution, and it's not going back to square one.
I love it. I'm glad you're saying this. People need to hear that. Let's talk about your book. What inspired you to write it? And you said the book is a piece of your heart and soul. Will you talk about it?
Yeah, I've written 2 prior books that were kind of clinical books for therapists to learn about trauma. And I've always been a very open book kind of person, Joe. Like, hi, I'm Frank Anderson. I'm gay. I have a trauma history. Nice to meet you. like that's kind of who I am. And, I've always liked to break down this divide between the us and them. Like, I'm the expert. You're the trauma survivor. I'm like, you don't become a damn trauma survivor. I mean, you don't become a trauma expert unless you're a trauma survivor. Sorry. I just that's the way it goes in my book. Why would you? Unless it was your mother or somebody in your life who was totally affected by trauma. So I clearly became a trauma expert because of my own trauma history. And as I've really tried to help the general public heal, kind of thought, what better way to teach than through story? Like, why not tell my story as a way to help other people heal? And, when my publisher first recommended it, I was a little bit shocked. I'm like, me? Like, who wants to hear my life story, right? But over time, I was like, wow, I have done a lot of work and I have a pretty significant trauma history and I am not where I was before. I have really come a long way. So if I can help other people through telling my story, I am all for it. And, Joe, what's been so amazing is the way people are responding. Like so many people are reaching out to me.
Good.
Oh my goodness, I can relate. That I didn't feel accepted either, or I cheated on my wife too, or I did this. Like these themes are universal,
Mm-hmm.
right? I went through a form of conversion therapy when I was a kid, right? And people are reaching out saying, I didn't go through conversion therapy, but I was constantly forced to be somebody who I wasn't for most of my childhood too.
Mm-hmm.
So like to have people relate to these themes has been very important. And I really, every time I'd come up with, I had this like thing in my head, the moments that made me, the moments that made me. And I just kept collecting my moments. So collecting my moments, then it turned into a memoir, right? And I would come up to a moment. It's like, oh my gosh, am I really going to say this? Like, am I really going to say this? And I kept coming back to truth is important. Truth is important. And I don't have shame around it. I've done enough work that I'm not carrying shame around what I've done. And so I just kept saying, okay, I'm going to put it out there. Okay, I'm going to put it out there. Nobody has attacked me. Nobody to date has attacked me for anything I've written about. I've only heard, thank you, thank you, thank you. So it's been a very powerful experience to kind of put myself out there in such a raw way and to not get backlash from it, really to get
loved, to be loved like the name. Would you say the core message of your book, To Be Loved, is?
Yeah, well, I mean, I did spend pretty much my whole life wanting to be loved. I think everybody in this world wants to be loved and deserves to be loved. I think everybody's been through overwhelming life experiences. And I think everyone has the capacity to heal and free themselves from their trauma. Like that is really the core message for me is we've all been harmed. The other thing is we all have harmed. This was an important part of the book is that, when you experience trauma, you internalize perpetrator energy. And we tend to hold on to victim and other perpetrators. This is what's happening in our political world right now. I'm good, you're bad.
Yes.
And it was very important for me to say, I'm really good and bad. And by the way, so is my perpetrator. So was my dad. I was part of like, if we're truly going to heal from trauma, we have to stop othering people and we have to acknowledge the ways we've harmed and we've been harmed. When I started raising my kids and I started seeing some of the behavior in myself that my father did projected onto me, I was mortified. I was mortified. Those are times in my life I was suicidal, really, and I was like, we are all both. And I think we need to acknowledge that if we're going to really heal from trauma. So that was another important piece for me, for sure.
It's a really good message, I think, for both sides. Before we end, what other messages would you like to make sure people know about what you wanted to say before we end?
What's the messages? Yeah, I guess those I've said. Well, I can say this: trauma blocks who you are. Trauma blocks your authentic self, and healing is possible. Releasing that energy is doable. I think everybody has a purpose in life. And I think once you release your trauma, you get to your purpose and you can live a more authentic life. And I want people to know that it's possible for everyone. It's why I'm so committed to bringing healing to the general public because, I think the world is ailing. I think many people are lonely. And I really want to get this message out to the world that healing is possible and love and connection are really all that matters.
I love that. It's so nice. Such a great message. And, because such dark stuff, and then
Yeah.
you're able to help people, especially by reading your book. And I can't wait to do that. I plan to be able to see you're a real person. And then you went through this and you overcame it. And here you are on the other side.
You got
And,
it.
oh, I know. So how can people find you and where can they buy your book?
Yes, absolutely. I can now say, because it's a general public book, you can find my book where all books are sold. Never used to be able to say that before. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, anywhere books are sold, you can get To Be Loved. My website is probably the best way to reach me. FrankAndersonMD.com. People can follow me and follow all the stuff that I'm doing. And I'm on all the social media channels, probably most active on Instagram, which is Frank_AndersonMD. But I'm on TikTok and I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm going to be on this new, what is it called? Blue Ivy or something?
The Blue Sky.
Blue Sky. Blue Ivy is what's her name's daughter, right?
Oh, I don't know. But
Beyonce's daughter is Blue Ivy. Blue Sky. I'll probably be on Blue Sky.
Yeah.
Not quite on there yet, but yeah, all the social media places.
Awesome. I'm so happy when you said yes to my team coming onto my show.
Great.
And I want to, because I know you are a big presence in our field. And so I really appreciate it. Thank you, Frank.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to talk.
Yeah. You can hear more of my podcasts at smartsexsmartlove.com. And you can also follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. That's all my handle there. And all of them is at Dr. Joe Kort, DrJoeKort. And you can go to my website, joekort.com, and you'll find more of my podcasts there as well. So thanks for listening. And until next time, stay safe and stay healthy.